So the nuance that we try to take with each athlete is dictated by how they move on the mound. The first thing that we absolutely have to take into account with an athlete that we see. So our job on the performance end is to supplement the skill work, is to try to provide an avenue that we can enhance the skill work through the things that we do in the weight room. Most of what we have in the population that we see, regardless of level, is that we need to improve their capacity for force production first and foremost, and we need to improve their overall physical capacity from a fitness perspective. As we get more nuanced, as the athlete continues to move up in levels and they need more of that hyper individualized programming, we really rely on their biomechanical analysis from our Kinetrax database, as well as some of our force plate mound data, to be able to choose those interventions in the weight room, not just from the actual strength block portion of their program, but with regard to the accessory movements as well as the corrective exercises that we choose, even down to the recovery routine that each athlete has, because of how heavily dictated their throwing drills, their throwing schedules are on the mechanics and the biomechanics that we see in the lab.
The problem that we're trying to solve is making sure that there's a good relationship between the throwing schedule and performance plans, keeping in mind workload, volume, frequency, and intensity of activity, and making sure that it's a true build-up process, introducing new stressors gradually over the time frame that we're working with, and not overloading the athlete system.
So when we get an athlete in, the first question obviously is when is the go date? When is opening day? Whether it be an MLB guy, MILB, college, or high school. We want to begin to work backwards from that date, knowing full well that the programming has to get the athlete ready from not just a capacity standpoint, but an intensity standpoint as well, to be ready to rock and roll on opening day. And having that plan working backwards from that first appearance that they make in season is absolutely critical for us to be able to know where to start. And for most of us, starting with an athlete as they get to us after their season's over, whether it be a college guy that's done with their spring season is going to train in the summer, or a high school kid that we know is going to start in March, what we need to know is what they've done leading up to that point, and then through our assessment process, what they look like. That's going to dictate the plan, but we know first and foremost it's to make sure that we provide capacity first for the athlete, and then layer intensity on as we get closer and closer to the start of the season, because that actually allows us, it sets us up to be able to train in season the way that we need to. If we've built enough capacity through the course of the off season, then we have the ability to maintain some intensity of training during the season, in the spring or in the summer, to allow for maintenance of those training residuals that they've worked so hard for.
So when we look at an off-season time frame, there's going to be a period of time where the athlete removes a lot of the skill work on the throwing side for a pitcher. And we're tackling a lot on the physical side from a recovery standpoint from the season workload, but also building up strength. And then as they move through that off season, we'll gradually start to introduce throwing frequency and then volume and then intensity, going through what we call an on-ramp, build, and mound prep phases.
So when we communicate with our pitching staff here at Premier, what we know that we need to do as a performance end is we need to prepare the athlete for the changes in throwing stimuli that they're going to have as they get through the course of their off season. So we feel that our changes need to precede the changes that happen on the throwing workload standpoint or the throwing intensity standpoint, to really prepare those tissues. So we try to be probably at least 2 weeks ahead in changing athlete programming before they get that change in the throwing stimulus, because we feel it better prepares the athlete both from a nervous system and tissue quality standpoint, and as well just training capacity to better respond to that training stimuli that then sets us up to be able to continue to build in the offseason.
The athlete, and you talk about people at different stages of their careers, some guys needing to get to the mound a little bit quicker for pitch design things. Other guys needing to, just be prepared at a certain level heading into, say, a spring training setting. Looking at a high school athlete versus a college athlete in those time frames goes back to that assessment process of like knowing those things ahead of time, knowing what buckets they're filling from a capacity and a skill standpoint, coming together to collaborate outside of just our individual silos, and making sure that that plan is well thought out. And again, not reactive, but proactive for what, a 6-week, section of your year could look like, a 12-week section, a half a year section, if that's how long your off-season calendars are. So this kind of symbolizes the time frame of an off-season. You can go, competitions over here. Okay. Enter into an offload at the beginning of the off-season. This time frame can absolutely vary for guys based on training age, based on development needs. They can look different. In general, you're getting between 6 to 8 weeks of offloading. Timeline could be more, could be less. Then we're looking at when does the season start, or preseason where you're facing hitters. Really the non-negotiable, right, is this on-ramp and build is what we call it. On-ramp is really starting to throw more back-to-back days and increasing volume. Build really is short for building intensity into the throwing program. And then mound prep is taking that intensity and getting even more skill specific into pitch design and things of that nature. So this we have to have. Offload can be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. Mound prep can even be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. But to get guys to a fitness level to be able to meet the basic demands of working on pitch executions at game intensities, or to spend extra workload on developing a secondary pitch or anything like that, we have to have this intact. So we're looking for the performance team to understand that, and then understand each guy's unique timeline as far as like this window and how we're going to supplement.
Yeah, and what's really important you touched on is that the timeline, the amount of time that you're going to spend in each one of these may change based on that go date that's over here, based on when they start, right? But what stays is the same as the contents, right? It is non-negotiable to have this kind of offload, because this here, right, these stages allow their connective tissue to respond and get back to baseline, right? Think about things that happen with the UCL. It becomes thicker and it actually becomes kind of more, it has more give to it, which is kind of interesting that it does that. But that offload and reducing that heavy connective tissue stimulus in this time frame allows that to return to baseline, allows it to return to its kind of structural integrity. So when it comes to performance, we want to spend a lot of time here in that aspect of things, restoring what the athlete has from a baseline, or in reality, you get to start improving upon it, right?
So what's important, right, is to note like the intentionality of like where these things are landing, right here, right inside of this this throwing schedule.
And I think most people are going to have it like we talked about, right? Lined up exactly where there's too many stimuli changing at once, right? The body, what we know from a health perspective, one of the biggest things that we can draw and correlate to injury is a change in too many stimuli at once. And it's the reason why those guys in early April, they get banged up, or right after the All-Star break, they get banged up. So definitely something that we try to be very cognizant of. What people forget, and this is the thing that I think that we have a lot on the table to improve on as a field in general, is I think for especially our intermediate training age, beginning training age, their intro to anything structured is going to be more capacity than what they've ever had. But our intermediate training age, especially we're getting into college, I do not think there's enough volume. And again, this is like, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not.
but there's not enough volume in the programming here as a transition from the GPP phase into a strength build. It's almost like we dump the volume because the intensity gets high. I think there's still room for total volume when we look at everything across both performance and health, that when we design a program for an athlete, we're going to blend these two together, right? And the accessory blocks begin to become these, as opposed to a completely separate arm care based program. I think it saves the athlete time, but it still helps build the capacity we need to ready us for this and this, and then sustain that all the way beyond that go day.
And just one more visual for kind of what's happening on the throwing side. We can say a guy's entering, their chronic workload is elevated up here as they get out of the season. And then through that offload, it's doing this. And then there is a gradual climb back up that mountain to where we're getting into our season kind of back where we were here, or not too far off of. So it's kind of important, and I think most people lose sight of like what's happening on that side of things physically, right? And why it's important for that to happen, because we never get a chance to address these important buckets with that, beginner or intermediate athlete, where they can still see a lot of output increased by making sure that we do get stronger, and making sure that side is satisfied.
Well, and in reality, right, you think about like what Tracker on Boost does for us is that we see this visual, but then you also get to see the undulation that helps to build that steady climb. That people forget that it's not just the week to week may not be this, right? It's more along the lines of here and here and here and here, right? And then you start to kind of build that way. And that's how week to week essentially works, or day to day within the week essentially works, right? The kind of week to week is more of that straight line, or really the dash line. That I think that we forget about is, like, in our heads as performance coaches, we should also have that same type of mentality over the course of a week. And in reality, you're still trying to get that dashed line of physical capacity to build leading into the season, and the undulation comes from the intensity, right? And that's the biggest thing too, is that understanding that your volume times your intensity is going to really make up that workload on the performance side as well. And it's kind of going back and forth, where I think now at the higher levels of facilities, we understand more of this on the throwing side to match this. But I also think on the performance side, we need to realize that our entire goal is, like I said, to at first build enough capacity that we have the ability to layer some intensity on, and it's more about the quality of that programming. And for me, this is where not only, for obvious reasons, get GPP, but we begin to become more, we can kind of write it down here, begin to become more general, right? And then you get more specific over here. And that's based on, that specificity is based on the feedback that Boost offers us between you and I, right? Or between the rest of our